How can a single moment change everything we know about ourselves? Discover in this thrilling story, where Emma faces challenges and prejudices at a prestigious music conservatory, proving that true talent and determination can overcome any barrier. The great clock in the main hall of the conservatory struck 9 when Emma walked through the double wooden doors, carrying her violin case. The marble walls echoed the hurried footsteps of the students who, upon noticing her arrival, cast disdainful looks. Emma, dressed simply and with her hair casually tied back, stood in stark contrast to the opulent surroundings and her elegantly dressed peers. As she walked, Emma heard whispers and muffled laughter. She distinctly noticed the tone of surprise and disapproval as she passed by small groups of students. "Look who came to try and be one of us," said a female voice loud enough to be heard. Emma tried to ignore the comments, focusing on her passion for music. She opened the case, took out the violin, and began carefully tuning the strings. However, the taunts continued. Nathan, a tall guy with a confident posture, approached with a sarcastic smile. "Lucky you being here, Emma," he said, looking her up and down. "Must be a miracle a talent like yours comes from somewhere so far and humble, right?" Emma looked up at Nathan, her expression impassive, hiding the whirlwind of emotions inside. "Music doesn't choose its origins, Nathan. It just requires dedication," she replied, holding the violin a bit tighter. As the bell rang, the teacher entered the room, signaling the start of the class. Emma sat down, positioned the violin, and closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She knew that despite the challenges and criticisms, her love for the violin was all that truly mattered. With a slight smile, she began to play the first notes of a complex piece, her music flowing clear and beautifully above the murmur of insecurities around her. As the notes filled the air, the malicious comments gradually silenced, forcing even the critics to acknowledge the beauty of that simple melody, but executed with a passion that only Emma could express. Now, Emma enters the audition room with her sheet music and violin, her heart beating between anxiety and the hope of standing out. The room, softly lit focusing the stage, feels more like a courtroom than a performance venue. Some students already filled the benches, casting glances and whispers as Emma positioned herself. Nathan, with a malicious smile, approaches under the pretext of greeting her. With a quick and almost imperceptible touch, he alters the tuning of Emma's violin and moves away before she can clearly perceive what he did. Called to the stage, Emma has no time to check the instrument and starts her performance. The first notes reveal the sabotage. A glaring dissonance fills the room. Murmurs spread among the audience as Emma, realizing the tampering, briefly hesitates. However, determined not to be overcome by the situation, she continues to play. Each note sounds like a challenge to the adversities, though distorted by the altered tuning. After finishing, the applause is weak and perfunctory. Emma quickly leaves the stage, her face a mask of forced composure. Backstage, a group of friends approaches, offering consolation and support. Anna and Julio help Emma retune the violin. "You showed a lot of bravery by not stopping," says Anna, while Julio adds, "Don't be disheartened. We know your true talent, and that was just low of him." Emma struggles to smile through the frustration, playing a few notes to feel the violin in harmony again. "I wanted a fair chance," she murmurs, wiping away a stealthy tear. Gathering strength from her friend's support, Emma decides to return to the music room to practice. The pure and correct sound of the violin fills the space, and she plays with renewed determination, each note a step in her journey to overcome the ordeal, knowing she is not alone in it. Desolate after her audition, Emma seeks refuge in the only empty music room in the conservatory. She sits down, unwraps her violin with trembling hands, and begins to practice again. The notes, once distorted by sabotage, now flow pure and clear, but Emma's heart is still heavy. As she plays, a shadow quietly appears at the entrance of the room. It's Mrs. Alvarez, one of the most respected teachers at the conservatory, known as much for her skill as for her compassion. Watching silently, the teacher listens to the emotion-filled melody Emma draws from the strings of her violin. Emma stops her practice when she notices Mrs. Alvarez standing at the doorway. With a sigh, she sets the violin aside, still resonating with the tension of the day. Mrs. Alvarez walks up to Emma with a sympathetic look. "Emma, I heard about what happened today, and I saw... How are you feeling?" Emma hesitates, words caught in her throat. Finally, she confesses, "I feel like I don't belong here. Every day is a struggle, not just to play, but to feel like I really should be here. My family, we're simple. We don't know this world of conservatories and concerts." Mrs. Alvarez sits beside Emma, her face reflecting deep empathy. "I understand completely, Emma. I also came from a humble place, humbler than you might imagine. Music was my escape and my passion, but it was never easy. People rarely reach out to help us open doors. Often, they seem closed to us." Emma looks at the teacher, finding strength in her words. "Then how did you keep going? How did you not give up?" Mrs. Alvarez smiles, a mix of melancholy and pride. "Ah, my dear, I learned early on that if life won't give you a key, you have to break down the door. Nothing should stop you. No matter how many times they push you out, you have to come back, stronger and more determined." "But what if I'm not strong enough?" Emma asks, insecurity trembling in her voice. "Strength comes with time and practice, not just in music, but in standing firm against adversity. And I will be here to guide you, to help you find that strength," replies Mrs. Alvarez, placing a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "I'll offer you private tutoring. We'll work together, and you will grow, not just as a violinist, but as a person who never lets barriers hold her back." Emma meets the teacher's eyes, and for the first time that day, a true smile lights up her face. "Thank you, Mrs. Alvarez. I accept your help, and I will break down that door." In Mrs. Alvarez's private classroom, Emma felt each minute of dedicated time as a step towards overcoming her challenges. The walls, filled with sheet music and portraits of great musicians, seemed to absorb every note played, while the afternoon sun cast golden rays across the wooden floor. Mrs. Alvarez, with an attentive and encouraging gaze, guided Emma through exercises in scales and arpeggios, demanding precision and feeling. "Focus on your breathing, Emma. Feel the music. Don't just play it," she instructed, adjusting Emma's hands on the violin. The transformation was not just technical. Emma was learning to incorporate her emotions into the music, a skill Mrs. Alvarez considered as vital as technique. "The music is your voice, Emma. It must tell your story," she said. During breaks, Mrs. Alvarez shared stories of her youth when she battled similar prejudices. These conversations reinforced in Emma the belief that her background did not define her destiny. "You are here because your music has heart, and that no one can take from you," Mrs. Alvarez affirmed with a smile. Gradually, Emma began to feel an internal change. Her walk, once hesitant, now conveyed determination. The disdainful looks from other students still existed, but they no longer affected her as before. Emma learned to see herself through her own eyes, not through those of others. At the end of each session, as she left the private classroom, Emma felt a deeper connection with her instrument, as if every part of the violin pulsed along with her heart. She knew she was preparing not just for a performance, but to show her true essence through music. Walking down the conservatory corridor, with the echoes of her violin still resonating in the walls, Emma was no longer the same. Day by day, note by note, and each word of encouragement from Mrs. Alvarez, she became a complete artist, ready to face whatever lay ahead with her music as both shield and expression. Tomorrow would be the end-of-year concert, and Emma felt ready to shine. The auditorium was packed, every seat filled with spectators eager for the end-of-year concert. The lights dimmed and silence took over the room, only broken by the sound of the final tunings of the instruments. Emma, with slightly trembling hands, positioned herself at the center of the stage, her violin firmly supported on her shoulder. Taking a deep breath, she raised her bow. As the first notes resonated through the large auditorium, all the nervousness seemed to dissolve into the music she created. The melodies flowed with a passion and precision that completely captured everyone's attention. Emma was transformed. Her posture and her gaze conveyed a newly discovered confidence. The music progressed, each movement of the violin more bold and expressive. The looks that were once disdainful now reflected admiration and surprise. Even Nathan, who had tried to sabotage her, found himself immersed in the performance, unable to deny the evident talent emanating from Emma. As the last note echoed through the auditorium, a silence charged with emotion preceded an explosion of applause. The audience, moved by the young violinist's triumph, rose in enthusiastic and continuous applause. Emma, with tears shining in her eyes, bowed in thanks. The director of the conservatory stepped onto the stage, proudly announcing that Emma would be the lead soloist next year and the winner of a coveted scholarship. The recognition of her effort and talent filled the auditorium with inspiring energy. Emma looked towards Mrs. Alvarez, who was smiling from the side of the stage, and knew that this was just the beginning of her journey in music. Her success was not only a personal victory, but a triumph over all the adversities and doubts she had faced. That night, Emma not only showcased her skill as a musician, but also established herself as a symbol of perseverance and dedication, a true inspiration to all who dream big, regardless of where they come from. Don't forget to like this video if you were moved by Emma's story, and comment below how music impacts your life. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new videos. Your participation makes all the difference in our community.